Hi, welcome, Camilla Watson. It's great to have you here today from Corlight Programmes. If you'd just like to do a quick introduction and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, that would be excellent.
Thanks, Judith. Yes, it's lovely to be speaking with you today. Yes, I'm Camilla Watson from Corlight Programmes, and I'm a life coach and counsellor. And I also run lots of classes for the community on related subjects. So my specialty areas are anxiety, stress and depression, and how those relate to individuals and families.
Fantastic. And I know, and I'm going to hone in on anxiety only because I know that for a lot of parents who have a child who struggles to eat, there's a lot of obviously anxiety around food, but often there's a lot of anxiety just in general with children as well. And, you know, and does that anxiety cause the struggles to eat, or does the struggles to eat, you know, exacerbate the anxiety? It's a bit chicken and egg, I would think.
Certainly.
Okay, so if we do have a child that, you know, has anxiety around food, is there anything that we can do, you know, from your perspective, that might support them just to be a little bit less anxious around food?
Well, I think one of the things we need to recognise first of all is we're using this word anxiety, and we're usually using the word to describe feelings.
Right.
So we have a child who might be feeling very tense. Maybe they're feeling sick in the tummy. They could be getting upset and crying, or maybe withdrawing or getting angry. And so we use the word anxiety to talk about these feelings, and to be able to separate that off a little bit is quite helpful. So I think first we need to look at what anxiety actually is, and that is fear. You know, if we take the word anxiety out, we're actually looking at the fear response.
Right.
So when we have anxiety around food, we're actually looking at a fear response around food. And then the question becomes, what is the child afraid of?
Okay, and so actually identifying what the trigger is for the feeling is quite helpful.
That is absolutely key. Absolutely key. Because if we don't identify what the actual trigger is, we will never get to the underlying cause. And it's quite likely that a child that has some anxiety around food will have some other anxieties as well. It could be that an anxiety has developed around food because of a particular traumatic incident. But a lot of the time, anxiety around food sort of stretches over from all sorts of other anxieties that the child may have.
And I think that's what parents often tell me, that their child does have generalized anxiety in other areas, and that might be that they, you know, they don't feel comfortable, for example, with mum leaving them when they go to a party, or they may be sort of overwhelmingly worried about, you know, animals, or, you know, there's a lot of sort of generalized anxiety. So if we do have an anxious child, and, you know, let's use I don't want to go to a party on my own, I want mum to come with me, as an example, what do we do?
Well, when we've identified what the core anxiety is, it often gives us the strategies for working through that. So if we can sit the child down and help them to figure out specifically what is the fear, what are they afraid of about the party? Now, it could be that they just don't like mum leaving them ever, in which case it's nothing to do with the party per se, but they have other issues about separation. So rather than working around strategies for the party, we need to take a step back and look at other strategies around firming attachment so that they are then feeling comfortable separating. It could be that there is a bully at the party, and that may be why the child doesn't want to go. Maybe it's somebody from their class at school that they really don't get on with or that they're afraid of. And that will require a completely different strategy. So if we can sit the child down and say, I acknowledge your feelings here. I can see that you're very upset. That's obvious.
Yeah.
Can we work out exactly what you are afraid of? And this is quite interesting because I had one adult client who was working with a fear of mice. But when we actually worked through it a little bit, she actually had quite a fear of all sorts of furry animals. So it wasn't just mice. There was this mild anxiety, at least, around all sorts of other animals. So we had to look at that as well as desensitization around the problem with mice.
That's fascinating, and you make this sound so simple, because that's so logical. If my child is worried about going to the party because there happens to be a bully there, then we've resolved the issue. And so I guess getting to the root cause is such a positive way to look at this, so that we do know. But I guess if we do have a child who's not able to articulate that, or if they sort of seem to have a lot of general anxieties, across the board, is there anything that you would recommend that is maybe helpful for us to do in that situation?
Yes, certainly. And often when children are quite young, of course, they can't articulate what they're afraid of. So it's very much about the caregivers being able to watch that child and pinpoint shifts and changes in behaviour. But overall here, what we're talking about next is building resilience. And this is about, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, resilience. But all that means is being able to face a challenge or adversity and get over it. And one of the challenges that we have in life at the moment is that a lot of children are being very sheltered from any challenge or adversity in life, and they don't develop skills to be able to pick themselves up and move on. Now, that doesn't mean that you just dump your child in the deep end. That's not going to be helpful at all. But it is about working out a strategy of how are we going to help this child learn to find their courage, learn to be brave within adversity. How can we help them challenge themselves in some area that might be just a little push, not too far, but a little stretch for them, so that they can learn that if they try and apply themselves, and maybe with help and support, they can overcome, and they can, learn the skills that they need. So there are all sorts of things that you can do. Parents can help the child with physical activities that are just a little bit outside their comfort zone. Let them climb to the top of the slide, let them climb the tree, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And
pointing out when you see the child being brave and competent, and acknowledging that, wow, I see you were scared and you pushed yourself through. I'm really proud of that. I hope you're proud too.
Yes, and I mean, from what I've read about and studied around anxiety, it is important that we acknowledge that the child is feeling something that's very real to them. Even though it may seem ridiculous, it's a very real feeling for them. But at the same time, we don't want to say, well, it's okay that you feel that way, because it's not okay that you feel that way. By saying it's okay that you feel that way, we're endorsing it, and we're telling them that their fear is justified.
Yes, when we look at what fear does to the body, if we just take a step back and we look at what fear does. So fear is presented within the body from input from our senses. So our senses are picking up some kind of threat in our environment, threat to life, or threat to life as we know it. As soon as that fear response is triggered, various things go on in the body. So we have adrenaline and cortisol that start to flood the body for flight or fight. We have a rise in blood pressure, which that can make your temperature go up, so you feel all hot and cold. We have heart rate increase, and that can make you feel shaky. This is why our knees shake when we get scared, because our body is trying to tell us to run. Yeah. So by acknowledging where the child is, you know, tell me how you're feeling, and not just accepting, oh, I'm feeling miserable. What's going on in your body? Oh, I'm feeling shaky, I'm feeling sick, I'm feeling clammy. And then reminding the child, this is actually a good thing. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive. I have adults who have difficulty with this, but this is your body telling you that there is something there, it doesn't feel as safe, and it wants you to get out. So the feelings are good, but we need to be able to identify where they're coming from and then what we're going to do with them. So once we've acknowledged, yeah, I'm feeling anxious, okay, that's real. That's real. Why are you feeling anxious? Can an adult help you figure this out? Because sometimes a child won't know. And then what are we going to do about it? You know, not what is the parent going to do to fix it, because that disempowers the child, but how can I help you work through this?
Yes. Okay. So it's acknowledging there's a fear, but then supporting them to identify what's causing it, and then how can we move on from there?
Very simple.
I know it sounds a lot easier than I'm sure it is in practice. So what do I do if we do have a child and they're anxious about something? And, you know, so for example, I don't know, they've got a fear, and this is one of my friend's children had a really you know, sort of huge fear of people in costumes. You know, they used to really, really frighten her. And so if you went to a shopping centre and, you know, they had the giant dog or something like that, that would be such a, you know, a huge thing for her. So if we see our child starting to get, you know, anxious and worried, and, you know, you can see that the heart rate's going up, and you can see they're starting to get really, really sort of overwhelmed by something, what can we do at that point to sort of, you know, sort of calm it down?
One of the best, well, there are two strategies, Judith. First of all, we need to be able to deal with the anxiety in the moment.
Right.
So right then and there, we need to be able to give the child a strategy to begin to calm down and to stop the anxiety response from escalating. Mm-hmm. So the very first principle that we use is centered breathing. When we go into anxiety or the fear response, we will automatically shift into a very fast, shallow breathing pattern.
Right.
So we can interrupt that with some focused, deep breathing. There are lots of things online for parents to learn to teach their children how to do some deep breathing, but just counting slowly, doing some nice deep breathing, breathing in and out, and being very centered will slow that anxiety response and maybe stop it from escalating. So that's number one, interrupt it right then and there.
Right, yeah.
Distraction, of course. Sometimes distraction will work, particularly with small children. You can just distract to something else in the room or the shopping mall, and that will take their mind off it. That might be helpful. And the third thing is, if the child is anxious, then getting some exercise, something that's just short and hard and fast, that will help. Basically tricks their system into thinking they've run away from the fear. So
right.
You know, outside, a little run around somewhere just for a minute or two will often be helpful. So those are some strategies you can use right then in the moment. But once you've identified the fear, for instance, the people in costumes, we look at where does that stem from? Well, we may know, we may not know, but it's probably some formative experience when they were quite a bit younger. So the best strategy for a lot of anxieties like that would be what we call desensitization. And this is where we just work out a plan to basically slowly reintroduce some form of that thing that is causing fear in a way the child can handle, and slowly increase and increase.
Right.
So, for instance, if the child was afraid of costumes or afraid of clowns or afraid of animals, we would start by the child playing with some kind of toy that looked a little bit like that. And then we would move to perhaps them pretending they were that thing. Pretend you're a person dressed up as a dog. So they begin to feel how the other person would feel. And then we might have them getting dressed up themselves. and then we would slide perhaps to big sister or brother getting dressed up, then mum or dad getting dressed up. So there's that continuity of people they know and something that's uncomfortable to them. And as we just take it slowly until the child is really comfortable at each stage, they will usually find that within a period of time that is no longer triggering that fear for them.
I love that idea. I love that sort of gradual desensitization. And of course, that's what I would be recommending around food too, that, you know, we can't dump the eggplant on a child's plate and then expect them to eat it. It's not going to work like that. It's that gradual, I've got to know what it is, I've got to be comfortable with its smell, I've got to be comfortable around it before I'm even thinking about putting it on my plate, never mind in my mouth. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Very, very similar strategies. You know, you just introduce something in a way that the child is, if not comfortable, then not uncomfortable. You know,
Right.
just introduce something in a little way so it's not pushing their whole fear response. And if we just take it one step at a time, they'll eventually come to terms with that. And just like certain foods, they may never really love people dressed up in animal costumes at the mall, but it won't be prompting that fear for them.
Right, absolutely. And so what would I do if my child sort of behaves inappropriately because they're anxious about something, you know, and sometimes that can bring out some really kind of ugly behaviors. And so are there any strategies how we can manage that as an adult? Because sometimes that can be really challenging as a parent.
Yes, it can be. And the best cure really is do not get into that situation. Once the child has completely lost the plot, there is very little you can do because they're running with that fear response.
Right.
And any adult knows when you've been really, you know, when you've had your fear response really pushed, you know, you're walking down a dark alley at 3 a.m. and you hear footsteps behind you, trying to get rational behavior in that situation is not always the best. So really we want to try and get children before they have a total meltdown. If we can distract in the early stages, we might be able to say, look, I think this thing is coming up, you know, whatever that fear is, and I know that might make you feel a bit afraid, you know, label the words. It might make you feel a bit afraid, and that's okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with fear, okay?
Yeah.
But I'm here with you. I'm going to support you, and I want to see if you can be brave. You know, can you be brave like the lion, or brave like Elsa, or, you know, one of their favourite characters? Can you be brave like that? And we'll get through this situation together. That's about the best way that you've got of dealing with that, where you acknowledge the fear, but you remind the child that you're there as their support system, and this is going to require a big step from them. You know, they're going to have to find their courage, their bravery.
Right. Now, this is an interesting one, because I know there are a lot of parents who are doing things with their children because they know that if they do things a certain way, then they're not, the anxiety doesn't sort of present itself. So, for example, you have a 10-year-old, and if you drop them off at their classroom in the morning, they have a really good day. If you drop them at the gate, then often the day doesn't go as well. So, you know, as a parent, we go, oh, you know what, they are too old for me to be dropping them at the door, but I know if I do that, things are going to go a lot better. What would you say to a situation like that?
This is a really tough one, because I'm going to say, who is the parent doing that for? Are they doing it for the child, in the best interest of the child, or are they doing it to help themselves feel better?
Right. Yes.
And that's a really tough one, because as a parent, you have to make that call all the time. You know, what's in the best interests of my child? And there is no hard and fast rule. You know, they don't come with a little manual.
No.
And when you finally get it right with one child, it doesn't work with the other children. And if you get it right with one child one week, it doesn't work the next week either. So this is the constant battle with parenting. But one thing that we do know is that a lot of children are being overprotected these days. This modern lifestyle, there's lots of studies and research and things on this, and it's not in the children's best interests. So while we need to keep our children safe, of course, our number one job is to protect our children. We also need to provide the necessaries of life, but we also need to prepare our children to become an adult human in the world. And if your child gets to 10 and needs to be dropped off to school, there's something a little bit out there where they haven't had training or experience or developed the skills to be able to do that for themselves.
Right.
So sometimes when a parent is doing something for the child, it's because it's easier. And that is because the child doesn't have the skills to do it. So we can ask ourselves, you know, can my 10-year-old develop the skills if we work through a training problem, you know, to do this, work through a training program?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And I guess what I often say when it comes to food is, am I supporting or am I enabling? And And that one's a really interesting one. You know, if I serve my child chicken nuggets every night because they like chicken nuggets and that's what they want to eat, I'm definitely enabling. But if I say, well, I know they're not going to eat the lasagna because it's just too much for them, but I'm going to supply them with a different sort of chicken dish, then that's supporting and sort of, that's sometimes a really, really challenging line to draw, you know, where we should be on that.
Yeah, this is one of the hardest parts of parenting. You know, people often say, oh, parenting is the most difficult job. This is why, because you're always trying to keep one step ahead of what your children need and what they need to learn. And it's just really difficult. It's a full-time job, keeping just that little bit ahead of your children to help them have the environment that they can learn the skills that they need to learn.
Yes.
And there are no real manuals there. Lots of good parenting books, but it's a lot of it's trial and error.
Right. So top tips, if we do have children who seem anxious around, you know, sort of a range of different things, what's your top tip? What's the best sort of thing that we can do?
First of all, learn some relaxation strategies for you and the child. You can, as the parents are the best teachers, they can teach the child to have some strategies to use when they're feeling a bit overwhelmed or anxious. Number 2, help the child identify what is the fear. Anxiety is a very socially acceptable word now, but it's not particularly useful. So if they're feeling anxious, they're feeling nervous, what is it they're afraid of?
Yes.
And then it becomes helping the child learn where to go for help. Do they need to learn new skills? Do they need to practice being brave? And, you know, working with your child to get the help and support to learn those skills would be the next step. A child that's anxious of everything or all sorts of things, we're talking about how life is filled with difficulties, and being brave and, you know, finding your courage can be a choice sometimes. You know, that's what courage is. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And sometimes that's just a choice that we need to make. So really identifying what the fear is, and then can the child deal with that themselves? Do they need support to deal with it? Or do they need, you know, wider assistance to learn skills?
So if I have a child and I've done this and I've tried to find the solutions and I'm still lost and I don't seem to be making a difference, how can we talk to you? How can we get in touch with you and get you to fix all our problems?
It's so much easier looking from outside. You know, it's very your own stresses when you're right in the middle of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
My website is www.corlight.co.nz, and my Facebook page is Corlight Programmes. There's lots of information on there. You can scroll through the posts on the Facebook page for information, little articles about anxiety and depression. And I also run classes for schools, for community groups, and so on. I'm running tonight, Building Resilience in Children at Tawa College. That's on at 7 o'clock tonight. The information is on the Corlight Programmes Facebook page. And next week, on Wednesday night, I'm running Overcoming Anxiety, Stress and Depression at Wellington High as part of the Community Education Program.
Wow, well, those both sound really interesting. The one tonight, we're probably not giving people a lot of time, but are these programs that you run fairly frequently, so that
most of them are on every term, at least once a term, right. And I can run any of these programs for your group. So if you have a parent group, or even for a school, a class group or a fundraiser, all the programs that are relevant are available for that too. So
fabulous
information.
Well, Camilla, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you today, and I think you've made it sound really easy. I don't know that it is in practice, but you've made it sound, a lot simpler, and given us some ways to identify issues and move through issues. And I think, that can be really powerful in itself.
Great. Well, I hope it's been helpful for some of your listeners, Judith, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to join you.
No, it's been fabulous. Thank you so much for giving up your time, and good luck with the workshop tonight. I hope that goes well. And obviously, if you do want to get in touch with Camilla, then you can find her at Corlight Programmes. And if you have difficulties, you can always email me and I'll let you know. All right. Thanks very much, Camilla. Lovely to speak to you.